Hey, Nathano. Welcome to Devotionables, brief devotions for busy people. I'm Rob Patterson. Because of the cooperative program giving of our church, I have the joy of serving as the evangelism team leader with the Kentucky Baptist Convention. Today, I have the privilege of bringing a word of encouragement from Psalm 55. You ever found yourself wishing you could just sprout wings and somehow fly away from your troubles? Well, in Psalm 55, David is in a very difficult time in his life, so much so that in verse 6, he writes, I say, oh, that I had wings like a dove. I would fly away and be at rest. Yes, I would wander far away. I would lodge in the wilderness. I would hurry to find a shelter from the raging wind and tempest. We all understand exactly what that feels like. We also immediately recognize that David's experiences were not that different than ours. It's not possible for us to fly or hide away from our troubles. And so I want to jump to the culminating word of encouragement in Psalm 55. David in verse 22 tells us, cast your burden on the Lord and He will sustain you. He will never permit the righteous to be moved. Wow. But how do I do that? How do I cast my burden on the Lord? I don't know about you, but sometimes my efforts to cast my burdens on the Lord seems like it only multiplies the weight of that particular burden. And so I want to share with you what I think is a critical progression in the text. I've circled these three phrases in my Bible. You might want to do the same if you have a chance. Verse 6 says, and I say. Verse 16, but I call to God. Verse 23, I will trust in you. Do you see that progression? I say, but I will call to God. I will trust in you. The last word of this psalm ought to be the last word of every one of our lives. In every circumstance, our desire, no, our greatest need is to trust the Lord. So how can we take that progression we see in the psalm and apply it to whatever current storm or tempest you might be facing? Three quick encouragements. One, pray even when God seems hidden to you. Pray especially when God seems hidden to you. David begins this psalm, verse 1, by crying out, give ear to my prayer, O God, and hide not yourself from my plea for mercy. Nothing causes us to want to run and just hide ourselves from our troubles more than feeling like God has hidden Himself from us. But the worst mistake we can make when life doesn't make sense is to pull away from God. The opposite, we've got to lean in. We have to run to God in prayer. Difficulty, hardship, loss, they might temporarily hide His face from us, but be assured God's not hidden. God has not pulled away. We have to cry out. Verse 2, David says, attend to me and answer me. I'm restless in my complaint and I moan. Oh, wow. That probably describes exactly how some of you feel in this moment. No peace of mind, sleepless nights. Every time you find yourself alone, you find that there's this groan or a moan that slips out because you just feel this heavy weight that's on your shoulders. David certainly did. He goes on in verses to follow and talks about how he feels this weight of oppression, anger, and turmoil that's been stirred up because of a grudge against him. And again, he unpacks verse 4, my heart is in anguish within me. The terrors of death have fallen upon me. Fear and trembling come upon me. Horror overwhelms me. My goodness. David's just pouring his heart out to God. And friend, that's all we can do sometimes, just express what we're feeling. And when we first come to prayer especially, all we can do is voice our complaint as David is doing. This is what's happening to me. This is my perspective. But we know we've got to move on from there. We know we need His perspective. And the only way we can move forward, as we see in the psalm, is to keep on praying until what's hidden is revealed. Keep on praying until what's hidden in you is revealed. Verse 17, David says, morning, evening, noon, I utter my complaint and I moan and He hears my voice. When you have a little more time to look at this psalm, you'll see verse 9, he's prayed that God would divide, God would break up this rebellious alliance that's come against him. Verses 10 and 11, he's praying that God would bring peace, restore peace to his city that's in turmoil. Verses 12 through 15, then again verses 19 through 21, David is praying that God would judge those who have turned against him. And it's a deep wound, as he talks about in the psalm. These are members of his own household. Absalom, who stirred up a rebellion. His most trusted ally, priest Ahithophel, they've turned against him. And David, in brokenness of heart, is saying to God, judge these who, as David describes, their voice, their words were as smooth as butter, but God, war was in their hearts the whole time. Those are reasonable prayers. In many ways, those are good, appropriate prayers. But to me, I think the breakthrough for David comes in verse 18. Now, by the time he gets to verse 18, David's prayed long enough. He's rediscovered his confidence in God. That opening complaint, "Don't hide yourself from me," changes in verse 16 to saying, "I will call upon God and the Lord will save me." That's what happens, by the way, when we persist in prayer. God not only shows himself faithful, but he renews and restores our faith. He strengthens our faith. And I think as we see in the Psalm, he does that more often than not just by revealing what's been hidden to us, but oftentimes what's hidden in us. Notice verse 18, David says that the Lord, he will redeem my soul in peace. He will redeem my... So notice David has stopped praying about what's happening around him, what's happening to him, and now he's praying about what God is doing in him. No peace in David's life, but there could be peace in his soul. And we're reminded that God's priority for every one of our lives as followers of Jesus would be conformed more and more into the image of his Son. And so oftentimes when we're in trouble, we have to keep our hearts open before God. There was a lot of work God needed to do in David's heart if David was going to be a man after God's own heart. And if you want to be a person after God's own heart, we have to keep our heart open before the Lord, even in times of pain, especially in times of pain. That's often when God does his most redemptive and sanctifying work in us. When trouble comes, our first thoughts, how do I get out of it? And that's what we're asking God to do. That makes sense. That probably will never change. But sometimes we need to pause and ask instead, Lord, what do you want me to get out of this trouble? What is it that you want to do in me? And so keep praying until what's hidden in you is revealed. And then lastly, keep praying the promises until you can trust God with all your heart. As we already said, David's opening prayer is "Don't hide yourself from me." It's quickly replaced with phrases as "He will give ear," "He does hear my voice," "He will save me." And then we have this amazing promise in verses 22 and 23. David's not just giving us a real life example to follow. He does that, but through him, God has given us an incredible promise. Cast your burden on the Lord. If you do, he will sustain you. He'll never let the righteous be moved. Then he goes on, verse 23, and he says, and he will cast down the wicked. You cast your burden on the Lord, God will cast down. He'll take care of other issues in your life. You don't have to try to get even. You don't have to try to defend yourself when God has taken up your cause. And so, friend, whatever that weight is, whatever burden you're carrying today, will you cast it on the Lord?